Oh, Dave disappeared. And he's back. Okay. So welcome everyone to episode number 83 of Rocket Lab Weekly. This is the last episode, I believe, before Rocket Lab announces their 2025 Q1 earnings. So this is going to be a very exciting episode. Thank you everyone for being here. And we have a full house today with Sir Matt Money, Dave G, and Scotto being here. Hello, guys, and how has your week been?
Dave, you should start. Let's get caught up. It's been a while.
Yeah.
Something's different, Dave. Yeah, tell us.
Well, it's been crazy for me. So obviously I'm in my new house now, but the past few weeks have been pretty hectic. So trying to set up the old place as an Airbnb, which I'm sure you have some experience with, both you guys. And it's been a lot of work on that front, as well as getting moved in and getting set up at the new place. And then the taxes were due this week. I had the biggest tax bill of my life at that point. And yeah, land transfer taxes a lot higher than I was thinking they were. So just a lot of stuff going on right now. And I've been haven't been able to follow my stocks as closely as I'd like.
Now, do you want to go next?
Sure. Appreciate everybody letting me join you guys for another week on Rocket Lab. It's been fun, man. I think my portfolio is back to slightly above all-time highs, which I think is a lot of fun for me. I think a lot of people are like questioning and scratching their heads. I invested a lot of capital over the past month and a half, 2 months, as the market was kind of down. And so that allowed me to kind of reap the benefits now that we had great opportunities, like investing in Rocket Lab when it was down $16, $17. Now we're just shy of $23 again. Definitely helps give a little bit of tailwinds to the rest of the portfolio. And then coupling that with just other opportunities as well. I had like 5% cash in my 401k that I moved a good portion of that over to being in the S&P/NASDAQ 100. So really, it's nice to see, even though that we're still 7% down from all-time highs on the SPY, or S&P 500 rather, back at all-time highs. So it's nice to kind of be there, and it just shows, you know, not necessarily from a Rocket Lab perspective, but just a general perspective, what can happen if you just continuously invest in the market over time, regardless of whether or not from a macroeconomic environment perspective, what's happening. Now, it's not to say completely just be blind, right? Of course, if there's some sort of massive macroeconomic news, but to me, I think that this was something specifically for the US side that is kind of a speed bump rather than a huge roadblock that needed to be avoided. So I continually invested through the cycle, and so far it looks to be paying off. What about you, Scotto? And
I mean, I don't have too much new to report in terms of the portfolio. I've just kind of been more or less in a holding position. We just had the Canadian election too, so I was kind of waiting to make a move in either direction, I guess, depending on the outcome. But I haven't bought or sold since the last time we talked. But Shift4 had their earnings this past week as well, and I wouldn't be surprised if I bought a little bit more, assuming the price holds up. It had a nice uptick of like 12-13% on the day that they reported. And then for whatever reason, it just kind of crumbled right back down to where it was. So yeah, I'll be watching that one over the next week or two. How about you, Vince?
Yeah, been a super busy week. I also was not able to follow the markets as close to as I would like. Hopefully that changes soon. And yeah, I started beekeeping, guys. And I have sick kids at home. So and there's a very slight chance if one of them starts crying, I have to like leave, but the chance is very, very low.
Beekeeping, like for honey?
Yeah. So
interesting.
Yeah, I needed some stress relief, you know. So
is that an add-on for the Airbnbs that you'll deliver fresh honey, or what's the deal?
No. It's purely a stress relief. I needed to do something that is, not always around the kids, and yeah, not always like business and work. And apparently being in a suit and having like thousands of bees attacking you at the same time is relieving stress somehow. I don't know how, but
maybe it's the chemical, that smoke chemical that they spray. Maybe it's that.
Could be. Who
Not
knows
my
what's in
idea
there, you know?
of stress relief.
Yeah, I'd be terrified personally, but as long as you're finding relief, that's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So let's start off the week. We have some. I was thinking we go through the news, and then we do some earnings preview and expectations and stuff like this in the end. So, the first news of the week is that Sir Peter Beck got yet another award. Let me see. Are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, there it is. Cool. So to be honest, I've never heard about this award before, but I'm happy that Rocket Lab is being more and more recognized. Other than this, I don't know if any of you think this is significant, or you guys have any comments on this news.
Best CEO in the industry, in my opinion. Happy to invest in him. I think he's great. So yeah, well deserved, and gets lots of recognition these days.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Then we go to the next one. And this one is an interesting. It's funny, we have been like discussing, like last week, I felt like the group consensus between us was like, okay, the Mars sample return mission is definitely not going to get canceled. It's going to be, even if it's canceled, it's going to come back in some form. And this week there was a new article by Eric Berger and Ars Technica, and I'm not an expert at all on how the US makes budgets, but it seems like a more detailed version came down, which is still not the final draft, but there's more details, and it looks like they are cutting out the Mars sample return mission. They are cutting the SLS and Orion. And in the same article, I don't know if you guys managed to read it. That's the bad news. But the good news is that there's going to be a lot more focus on commercially getting to the moon and commercially getting to Mars, which I think could be very bullish for Rocket Lab. So I'm curious, what do you guys think? How do we stand on this? Because for a lot of people, the Mars sample return mission is like a dream thing for Rocket Lab to get, and it seems less and less likely that this is happening.
Yeah, I think it's always been a long shot. I wouldn't say the book is fully closed on this. I think we're kind of seeing politics happening in action. Earlier in the week, or was it last week, you had Ted Cruz, senator, forget which state, but very prominent space. And I think he's on some committees, talking to Jarek Isaacman during his confirmation hearing and being like, would you consider commercial alternatives for the MSR? And Rocket Lab was mentioned in the excerpt there. So he clearly wants it to go forward, and the White House does not. And I guess there's going to be lots of trading and budget wrangling, and we'll see what happens at the end of the day. Probably, I would say odds are it doesn't end up happening, but you never know. Maybe there's some kind of a trade where senators are like, okay, we'll agree to your budget if you include MSR or something, but you never know.
I think it's kind of unsurprising, unfortunately, as well. With I think we talked about it on a previous episode. With if you're going to be sending manned crafts or even Optimus manned, I don't know how you say that, but craft with Optimus on board, if it's that easy for them to just like get out of the ship and pick it up, maybe it doesn't make so much sense the way that Rocket Lab proposed. But I don't know, would be cool, but kind of is what it is, I guess. As far as like some of the other programs, it's kind of like, yeah, SLS maybe needs to go. Like a number of these programs could probably be better off without, but yeah, never a dull moment.
Yeah, I think agree with the rest of the group. I'm anticipating to see a lot of the efficiencies start to run through, not just space, but a lot of other programs as well. I think we're sitting on large big contracts where you're used to just giving cost plus 30% or even more. And to me, I think that there's a need to now agree to things that have been made more efficient and actually make some of these historic companies that have become these massive defensive conglomerates really, I guess, show their abilities that, you know, Rocket Lab has had to go through, SpaceX has got to go through, and some of these other more recent companies that have really bootstrapped their way to even being on the names of or getting their names to have a NASA name on their contracts or vessels. And I don't think that we've had that sort of overhaul. And I think now is a good time. And maybe it means in the short term, some contracts get canceled or even delayed. But I think in the long term, that might mean that we eliminate the things that cost $4 billion to kind of launch, and we actually get several, you know, $50 million or $100 million launches in a much more rapid pace and a lot greater cadence. And that obviously plays well to Rocket Lab. That obviously plays well to SpaceX as well as they continue to get costs down. And I like to utilize the hypersonic example where they were using the Minotaur 4 that cost $50 million per launch, but now we're using the testbed vehicle of HASTE, which is around $10 million per launch. So you're getting at least 1/5 of the cost, and obviously greater reliability likelihood as well. As from what I understood, the Minotaur 4 wasn't necessarily the most reliable vehicle. So it might be short-term pain, long-term gain, my thought though. And as well as, yes, it might not be called Mars Sample Return, but with all these different projects, they're going to be repackaged and given new project leaders, I'm sure, as Isaacman is kind of taking over, and hopefully get rid of some of the old boys club that was kind of stuck in NASA, where, to be very frank, we haven't really achieved much. You know, it's easy for me to say armchair rocketry and armchair kind of space, but you know, I think we're really needing to revamp how we think about space and really begin, because there is a space war going on, regardless of whether or not space race probably is better than space war, but space race going on, whether or not people believe it or not.
Maybe I could just chime in with a question here, I guess. So a couple things. You know, first of all, I wonder if this is a little too SpaceX friendly. It kind of seems like everything that doesn't need Starship will get canceled. And obviously Elon wants humans on the moon, and they talk about recovering samples with humans specifically. So that's kind of going with Elon's thinking as well. And then I just kind of wonder, like, Isaacman's about to come in, and the budget, I guess he is an administrator and they don't always make all the decisions, but you'd think maybe wait for him to get in before you make all these calls. I don't know.
Okay,
I hear what. Yeah, I was gonna say, I hear what you're saying. The only thing is, it's you know, like very like clickbaity to say that, okay, the MSR is getting canceled, right? And it's not like, if you read the article, there's also things that are being added to the because, for example, this administration wants to get on the moon faster, wants to go to Mars faster. So there is actually some cuts and savings are going towards those programs, and those programs are going to be done commercially. And I also had this, I'm like, if SpaceX gets all these contracts, it's not really a good look, you know? But if SpaceX and other companies together get this, then it's actually really bullish for Rocket Lab. And that is what I'm leaning towards. Like SpaceX, logically, because they are the biggest company, like they will probably get over 50% of the contracts. But as long as Rocket Lab gets something, right, like 5%, 10%, it's going to be really, really bullish for Rocket Lab.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Vince. You know, 50%, I don't think is very far away. You have to think, though, SpaceX is the furthest along. They've launched some of these boosters now for the Falcon 9 rocket over 25 times. And yet we have yet to see, except for New Shepard, another vessel really land itself other than the spacecraft that are coming out of SpaceX, except for maybe some Chinese vessels or maybe other countries that have done it that I'm not necessarily aware of. So I think until you're able to prove that capability and reuse some of these vessels and get costs down, I think it's going to be a race to who gets that other 50%. And maybe over the long term, 10, 20 years down the road, as other people build that capability, it might lessen the need for SpaceX having the majority of those contracts. But for right now, they're ahead, and they're ahead by a decent amount of margin. So the hope is by 2030 or 2035, when these missions really start to go off, that Rocket Lab puts themselves in a great position to really get themselves in a spot where they can reuse the vehicles and really excel.
All right, I think this is a good one to also segue into the next piece of news. So it looks like the SDA is pausing tranche 3 TL contracting. And it looks like they are also pausing the Sigma and the Lambda T3TL solicitations until further budgetary guidance has been received. Now, I'm not an expert on the different layers of this tranche 3 for the SDA. I just know that we're expecting Rocket Lab to bid and win. Is it the Gamma layer? Is there someone who's better than me on this here?
I mean, I think for tranche 2, they have transport layer satellites, right? So I would expect at least transport layer for tranche 3, if not some of the other more, high value satellites. I actually didn't see this until today, so I'm quite surprised. I've been a little, as I said, busy. So yeah, I should have known about this one.
I think it came out today.
Okay.
When is the post? I think
21
it's
hours ago. I'm seeing maybe.
Ago.
Yeah, that's unfortunate.
You see, May.
I mean, I don't
okay,
like
so
it, but
maybe this is something. But so Rocket Lab is part, because when I read this, I was not even sure that this is the one that we're expecting Rocket Lab to be bidding on and maybe win this year.
Well, they definitely would be bidding on for sure, but it doesn't impact. I just want to make it clear. I think Dave said it well. Rocket Lab's current awarded contract with the SDA, the $550 million, is tranche 2 transport beta layer. So what this announcement doesn't impact that. But you're right, Vince. It could impact the potential bidding and winning of further contracts for the SDA.
Yeah. That's what I meant, because there's a few catalysts that we're waiting for on Rocket Lab this year. And, like one of them was the MSR. Another one is the Neutron launch. And then another one is like winning further SDA contracts. And that's what I was. But it looks like it's on hold until the budget is fully sorted out.
So what if theoretically this ends up getting canceled, and then this SpaceX Starshield partnership with Endural ends up getting like a big missile tracking constellation contract? Do you guys still feel okay about how things are going with the administration and decision making and stuff?
That's a very interesting. I mean, it's hard to give an answer on it without getting all the data. Like, it would suck if I would definitely be displeased if that was the, how do you call it? If that was the only thing, right? But if they award things to SpaceX and they say, okay, but we're still going to do these other satellites and other people can bid on it, then I'm sort of happy. Like, it's really interesting because SpaceX is the biggest dog in the space race, right? So even if Musk was not close to the administration, like, logically you could expect that they would win a huge part of these contracts, right?
Yeah, I think I would say be disappointed. I'll answer Dave correctly, and I understand where he's going with this question. And the reason why it would be is because SpaceX hasn't delivered any competency, from my perspective, of delivering satellites like this nature. In my particular thought process, the way I look at Starlink is specifically a internet kind of service provider and communications device. So it doesn't necessarily, to me, make sense why they would potentially get the contract over somebody like a Rocket Lab, who has literally a plethora of different sorts of buses and vehicles and use cases, to which have been utilized by NASA and many others to kind of advance the frontiers of space. So yes, I would find it kind of out of left field. I personally don't think it's going to happen, but I don't know, to be honest. But I think that it's unlikely that SpaceX is going to come out and win a large contract like this. In terms of sending it to space, though, definitely think that they have the capability and have demonstrated that. So, but yeah, I would be surprised because, at least from what I'm aware, that SpaceX sends a lot of NASA vehicles, and it sends a lot of Rocket Lab made vehicles. We saw the Psyche mission last year in collaboration with NASA. So if SpaceX was that ready to send other types of satellites to space, why wouldn't they be doing the sort of Psyche missions and many others?
I also just want to add one point, that the stated goal of the government is to, one, initiate a space economy, and number two is they don't want to be dependent on one supplier. Like this has been said in many publications, that they want to have redundancy for the government. And if they would make it so that SpaceX, Anduril, and Palantir are the only suppliers of their whole satellite system, it would kind of go against that doctrine. And I like it would be brazen corruption, I think, to do that, because it's like, for a national security, you want to have the satellites built from many different suppliers, because God knows what will happen. Like if SpaceX has a factory bombed down, or for whatever reason, national catastrophe or something, cannot produce satellites, then how do you get satellites up? Yeah.
Any thoughts on this, Scott? I don't think you chimed in yet.
I'm sure we'll see something about this. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, I think we'll see this, like, come back into fruition in a matter of time. It seems like, depending on the day of the week it is, or depending on the mood of, that somebody woke up in, everything in government changes. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this got back on track, and probably honestly, once Isaacman is confirmed. So I don't know. I'll just, kind of wait on this one. The only thing I really have to add to this, it's a little bit vague, but I do have a note here that's like Rocket Lab related, in terms of Tranche 3, is that there is a note from November that there's the upcoming solicitation for 200 satellites under Tranche 3. So it gives us a bit of an idea of how big the program is. And I'm not sure if this is for the tracking layer or for Tranche 3 in its entirety, but we were originally, before this slowdown, expecting the awards to be announced October, I'll say. It's the 1st or the 15th, depending how you're looking at it. So I don't know, maybe, hopefully still by the end of the year, we get some more signings for that.
Yeah, I guess I shouldn't overreact too much, I guess, if it's just a pause, but I don't know. This is just my initial reaction. Like, I didn't see it before, so I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I think it seems like it's in hand with, I think, a lot of the other contracts across not just space, but the entirety of the government getting contracted and restructured to make sure that they're done fairly, and with the current administration, not necessarily the right administration, but the current administration. And I think I agree with what Scott said. I think, if anything, it's a pause. It's not a complete elimination. I think that, at least from my perspective, I have yet to see something from this current president administration to say that they're against the future of space exploration. And so, to me, I don't think that these cancellations mean put on a shelf and to be picked up in 4 years. I think it just means they need to be rebid and potentially get delayed by 6 months to a year and repackaged differently. And who knows, Eisenman might come out, and I'm actually kind of curious to see what he says once he's kind of finally gets his feet on the ground and starts to come out with a little bit more oomph in terms of what his thoughts are. But yeah, very curious, because I think he's from both sides of the aisle. I think Eisenman has been very well acclaimed, and also everyone seems to be quite excited with him joining.
Yeah, I just want to segue into this because, again, it's the same, like we have been talking about, things going away, and that very easily gets a lot of attention, that this gets cut, that gets cut. But Tran posted that the 25 billion that is earmarked for the Golden Dome includes 15 billion for satellite sensors, launch infrastructure, and interceptors. And then he gives a breakdown of what it is. And I think Tran himself posted that two of the biggest line items here is expected to be won by the SpaceX, Anduril, and Palantir group. But look at how much is left still. Like the two biggest line items is 7.2 and 2.4. And 7.2, 5.6. You still have 2.4 billion, another 2 billion, and then hundreds of millions of contracts. So I think that there is, how do you call it? Food for everyone here on the food chain.
We've heard a lot of talk about this Golden Dome, and a lot of it seems to touch on missile tracking, which is obviously what the SDA constellation does. And I've just been a little bit confused, very high level, how these two, programs intersect. Are they completely separate? Like, I'm just a little confused how that all works.
I think it's not only you. That's why maybe it was paused, because somebody says wait a minute, we're working on two multi-billion-dollar project that might be overlapping completely.
I think that's likely to be the case the more that we're talking about it.
Yeah. Well, all right. We go to the next one, unless you guys have more to say about this. So we went from shitty news to quite good news. I think this is very bullish for Rocket Lab. This is also a post by Tran, and he says that this appears to have slipped under the radar. So apparently the UK and New Zealand space sectors will join forces to tackle climate issues facing both Earth and outer space as part of a new agreement struck during New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon's visit to the UK this week. As part of the new UK-New Zealand space science partnership, the two countries are launching an open call for joint Earth observation demonstrator projects. You guys can see the tweet and read more about it. But the way that I'm talking this is they are doing a joint constellation, which is going to be paid for by the governments. And my guess is that we know who is going to launch these satellites and possibly even who's going to make them. Yeah, go ahead, Dave.
Oh, I was just saying, we haven't really seen Rocket Lab do Earth observation to this point. So, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I guess it's just a demonstrator at this point. Is that right? So maybe just technology demonstrator type thing for now. This one as well, I didn't see clearly. I've been a little out of touch.
Yeah, well, I don't. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Now, I was just going to say, this is not Rocket Lab lobbying the UK. This is the government talking, who then, then companies will have to bid for this. So, yeah, it might seem to go against that, Rocket Lab will not go into the Earth observation. But hey, here they would be paid to go into it, which we know Sir Peter Beck kind of likes to do things that he's being paid for. And yeah, who can blame him?
Yeah, for sure. I would like to highlight, I think this has a lot of synergies. It's apples and oranges. I'll just be blunt with there, but it has a lot of synergies with the high flight kind of agreement that was signed in November of 2024 with respect to the United States, UK, and Australia with respect to hypersonic testing. So I feel like I don't want to say there's a lot of synergies in terms of specifically the Earth observation demonstrator project and hypersonics, but it seems like all the governments of the West, or maybe including Australia and New Zealand, they're not necessarily West, but they're all talking, and at least in good terms when it comes to trying to progress, really what's going on in terms of space and collaborating from a space exploration perspective. So to me, I think it seems good. And with respect to that, knowing that Peter just got his feet into the UK and he's been testing, getting his feet into the UK since 2017, 2018, when he was investigating launch sites in Scotland. I think with that, you can see that he obviously has a good relationship with the Crown. And with that, I think you have a foot in the door when it comes to potentially providing launch services or collaboration projects for the future. And with that, if you're going to be doing something like this, you're going to need a cadence that's much better than currently what the European Space Agency has to be able to kind of get this off and running much faster. And so coupling that with the fact that not many people in the European nations are a big fan of Elon at the moment, just based off of the mainstream media, I have a strong feeling that something like this would inch a little bit closer towards Rocket Lab space than it would with potentially SpaceX.
I don't have too much to add here. I think Dave and Matt, you summarized it pretty well. I guess the only thing I'll speculate on is the kind of curiosity, I guess. Like, kind of historically throughout Rocket Lab's history, they've almost had their customers pay for their R&D to a sense. Like when you think of like Varda, for example, what they've done for the Pioneer craft, and now Rocket Lab has the reentry capabilities that were kind of paid for by somebody else. So it kind of leads me to wonder if maybe that we're going to see something similar with Earth observation, where they kind of dip their toes in, and now they have that under in their quiver as well. That'd be kind of cool to see. But yeah, it seems like there's more and more cooking from between UK and New Zealand, and I guess USA indirectly as well here. It's good to see.
Yeah. My only question is like, because I don't know any space companies in the UK. Like, does UK produce satellites or components for satellites? Or because the whole thing feels like the UK government could just buy everything from Rocket Lab, and that would be the New Zealand UK cooperation,
I don't have an answer with respect to satellites, but I do have an answer when it comes to hypersonic testbed testing. And the answer is no bueno for not just the UK, but the majority of the European Union, which is why I think it was such a big deal that we saw in April 2-3 weeks ago, that kind of contract coming out for the UK with respect to the hypersonics testbed, because that could bleed into the collaboration efforts of 4 or 5 different countries. I forget what countries they are, but obviously Germany and I think France are all in cahoots with respect to hypersonic testing for the same reason why the United States is into it, the Golden Dome sort of thoughts and defense, not necessarily at the moment from an offensive perspective, but more from a defense perspective. And that's where Rocket Lab plays best, right? Is they're not really looking at it from an offensive test bed, but a defensive test bed. But when it comes to satellites, that I don't know. Looks like Curtis says they have a lot of different space companies. So, but hypersonics, no bueno.
Seem to remember Scott Manley saying some company up there was working on trying to get sovereign launch. I don't remember the name of it though, or how far along they are. I know Virgin Orbit was looking to launch from there as well. Obviously, that didn't turn out great. So, yeah, they don't have that company trying to get launch going either. But I'm sure they have some other space companies just not doing launch.
No. Interesting. So we're gonna, I guess, get updates on this in the future. So now, this was all the Rocket Lab news weeks, but before we get into the earnings, there is 2 space news that I think is good to cover. So one of them is we had the latest launch of Firefly's Alpha rocket. So this is a company who apparently can land on the moon, but is not able to launch a rocket into space. Very interesting combination. Usually it's the other way around. And it looks like out of 6 launches, only 2 have been a complete success. And while this sounds really bad, I wrote a tweet and pointed out that on Falcon 1 and Falcon 9, you could have gone to the 5th launch and said, out of 5 launches, only 2 have been successful, because it's the beginning of the rocket development program. And usually in the beginning is where you have the least reliability. Because I saw some comments that people were basically saying that, Firefly is done and the company's dead and they're like a complete failure. And sure, this is not helping, but I think that they can still turn, like, they still landed on the moon. So they have some talent and good engineers there, and I'm sure that they will be able to fix this. So curious on your guys' take on this.
Yeah, I feel for Firefly. Definitely rough, and they had a tough time with their Alpha rocket getting going. Anomalies are never fun. Was it wild seeing that video there of the second stage without the engine nozzle, and it was still going. So it was definitely one of the more interesting anomalies I've seen. But yeah, as you pointed out, they landed on the moon. They've done a lot of things. It would be cool to have them as a public company just to know what their financial situation is looking like, because I don't know a ton about the kind of capital they have available. Yeah, that's the video there with no nozzle.
But do you think it's an angle of the camera, or there is actually no nozzle?
No. It got knocked off. There's actually pictures out there of previous launches, and you can see second stages side by side. And this one, the nozzle's gone from the end of the second stage. So,
but how does it physically still work? Because isn't like the nozzle the one that is like pushing the gas that you throw out is like pushing against the nozzle that makes you go the other way?
Yeah, I guess it would be a lot more diffuse and you get way less performance. Like it kind of channels it out, right? And this will like spread out further, I'd imagine. Yeah, I hope they get it sorted out. It'd be interesting to see how Lockheed Martin's feeling right now. I think they gave them that contract for up to 25 launches for satellites around that 1 ton. So Lockheed tried with ABL. ABL pivoted and is no longer doing launch. Now they're trying with Firefly. Things are looking a little iffy there. So, yeah, customer might be a little nervous, but hopefully they get it sorted out.
Just looking at their past 4 launches, there's been the time between the launch we just had and the one previous was 300 days. And before that was 200, roughly. It was 194. And then before that was 99 days. So the past 4 launches have had an additional 100 days in between each launch. So it's not the best relationship. But, Firefly was originally planning 5 launches this year. But with Alpha assuming to be grounded for at least a few months, it has me wondering how this might affect the Victus Haze mission that's supposed to go off in October. If like those 5 launches in the year still have to like go in a sequential or like a particular order, or if maybe the next what would have been the next 2 launches are kind of pushed into 2026 now, or how exactly that might work. But it's kind of worth having in the back of your mind as a Rocket Lab investor that this could potentially impact one of the launches. Not a big deal. It's like one. Well, I mean, I guess it was like 32 million, but I don't know. Just something to keep in the back of your mind. Might be a little bit delayed, but yeah, wishing Firefly the best though.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. These guys obviously just had a Series D round of $175 million cash raise. And as you noted, in the first quarter, they were able to land successfully on the moon. So, I have high hopes still. But at the end of the day, I think these guys are still several years behind Rocket Lab in terms of launch capability. Obviously, we collaborated well with them when it came to the Blue Ghost lunar lander. And so I'm curious to hear, it's one of my thoughts that we'll talk specifically about that when it comes to the first quarter earnings next week, and hearing specifically about what we learned, because obviously we helped with respect to the software and potentially other components on the lunar lander. So I will say it's a little bit disappointing. After the lunar lander, I was really expecting slightly more out of Firefly, but space is hard and launch is hard, so I'm not giving up on them yet. And it seems like that they have the backing and relationships with several of the others. So, I don't think that they're as boisterous or as Astra. So I give them a little bit more grace when it comes to their failures, and hoping that they're able to turn around and be successful.
By the way, we just saw that puff there, and I think the first stage exploded, right? Like, that's been confirmed, right?
Yeah, at least what I saw on Twitter. Yeah,
pretty big investigation around this one too.
Yeah, something definitely went wrong. Well, all right, we go to the last news before the earnings preview, and that is that we got the first look at what Amazon's Kuiper satellites look like. They deployed in the darkness, but their trapezoidal shape reminds me of OneWeb, clearly a far different design than Starlink. And I saw a comment on this that so far the stream for the Kuiper launches have always been cut so that you were never able to even see the payload, and they have been super secretive about the satellites. And this is from yesterday, so I'm sure a lot of armchair engineers can maybe give us some clues on why they chose to go, this way. I'm not at all an engineer, and I'm not seeing any, like, this doesn't tell me anything that it's this shape or that shape. Yeah. I don't know. Do you guys have any comments on this, or we just move into the earnings?
Well, I'm surprised they showed this. They've been so secretive throughout this entire process, and I thought they cut the launch coverage, but interesting to see. I think I saw some estimates for like the weight now showing up online and stuff like that. So I guess we've got a lot more info on them. I would think you can't pack as many into a rocket with this kind of design, so probably not as huge of a constellation as Starlink, but maybe they're a bit more beefier and can deliver more bandwidth and stuff like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, can someone do it frame by frame and then zoom in and see if they can see the reaction wheels and a Rocket Lab logo on it, so Scott can finally figure out this mystery.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah, I allegedly there's another customer, I think they provided the dispensers maybe, and they announced that they were partnered with Kuiper. And again, allegedly, once the satellites start launching, then it's kind of like a go ahead. They're kind of out of that NDA period. So I know I've said this for what, like 5 earnings calls in a row now, but maybe this is the one where we actually get that. I don't know.
But this time it's different.
Yes, exactly.
But I have a question. How come that company was allowed to disclose that they're working with Kuiper?
I don't know. I think it's because that first this launch happened. Like the news just came out this past week, and that's kind of the speculation that like once the first proper launch went off, then they're kind of like clear to announce. So maybe that's what we're going to get next week. I don't know.
Well, hope dies last. So
Yeah.
I think we should go into earnings. So there's this guy who's here with us who made a very good video about all the numbers and everything. So I highly recommend that you guys check it out. I have it on the screen. But so I just want to preview a little bit what I think on the earnings. So last year, Rocket Lab had really standout quarters, and the growth has been 60, 70% year over year, sometimes even quarter over quarter. It's been an insane growth, and obviously the market likes that a lot. This year I like Rocket Lab, the company, a lot more, but it looks like the growth rate is going to slow down to 30%, maybe 20%. And I'm not sure how the market is going to like that or not like that, or how the market is going to think about that. So for me, the biggest thing obviously is I don't really care about what's in these earnings. I want to see Neutron fly and any updates on Neutron and Neutron customers, and I want to see the backlog starting to go up. That's what I'm looking for in the earnings. But I want to give the word over to you guys. If let's see what do you guys think.
I mean, to kind of, I'll start just kind of talking in terms of, like you mentioned, the 30% growth year over year. I think that most people are just going to be so kind of like whatever about it, because if you look at the next year, and obviously this is, the numbers are going to change, but for full year 2026, like doing the year over year comparison, we're looking at 120% increase in launch revenue, 30% in space systems, and 60% overall. So even if we do have 2025 being a 30% growth year, like the market's just going to look ahead, be like, yeah, but what about 120% growth? And that's even without. Oh no, never mind. Yeah, so 100. Yeah, so I think the market will just look ahead and kind of not make an excuse, for lack of a better word, I guess. So.
Yeah, I mean, earnings have always been lumpy since they went public. You look back to 2023, they had something like 16% revenue growth, which is pretty weak. But then 2024 was 80. Obviously, 2022 was huge because of the acquisitions. So, it's not the most exciting year in terms of revenue growth, but if you get something like 30, that's still pretty solid. And then you're looking into the future, a lot more growth coming from Neutron, their own constellation, and beyond. So as long as we get those technology demonstrations that they work, like Neutron, and maybe see some flatellite movement, I think the excitement for the future and what they're laying the groundwork for should hopefully be more important than 1 year of like more modest growth numbers.
Yeah, I think it's easy to think about when we compare company to company, the straight lineness that we might see coming from like a Palantir that might be able to generate anywhere between 16 to 30% on a quarter by quarter basis. And, they're able to generally grow revenue, very straight. But, you're talking about a company that really has just got its footing really over the last 3 to 4 years in terms of being able to start running. And with that, I think until you get a larger market share in the satellite business and a larger market share on consistency during launch as well, it'll continue to be lumpy. And, with that, you're bringing on new business segments as well. So like, keep in mind in 2021, it was really just launch. And then we were able to, there were some space systems, right? But really we weren't able to get too much from the space systems business until 22, 23. And not only that, but you're running off of old contracts that you didn't necessarily sign. It's most of what you're kind of dealing with. It's just like the hangover of the previous sort of folks. And as we know, some of these businesses would stop taking orders in like August, September timeframe because they didn't have the capacity. Now you're able to unlock that and grow that capacity and add additional warehouses and what have you, manufacturing facilities to be able to start building some of these things. So I think as you continue, I think Dave said it right and Scott said it right, as you get some of these contracts under your belt for Neutron, for Flatellite, for SDA future contracts, you'll start to see this larger piece of revenue growth. But I think right now we're kind of waiting for the things that we set in motion in 2023, 2024 to kind of flesh out. And you'll see that hockey stick in terms of the backlog, I believe, start to show up. But the revenue is going to have a little bit of a lag period to be able to adjust to that. And I think a lot of that has to do with Neutron, obviously, being a huge pivot point, but also HASTE really just starting to get into the mix as well. And so we're starting to see inklings, but I don't think you'll see that large hockey stick in revenue until you get to 2027, 2028, when these things really start to build cadence.
Dave, you're muted.
Yeah. You just mentioned backlog, so I was just kind of curious, because one thing I've been looking for is, that backlog to grow. It's been sitting around 1 billion for a little while now. So in light of this SDA Trans 3 news, do you think there's any risk of the backlog staying flat for longer? Does that worry you guys at all?
What I was just thinking of as we were speaking about the backlog is, I'm like, is it possible to meaningfully grow it without a major announcement? Because obviously when you let's say you look at the Japanese IQPS 4 launches on Electron, right? That, like, let's say that's $30 million. I'm just giving a number. That's only a 3% increase on the backlog, right? So the things that would meaningfully increase the backlog is another, like, SDA satellite, $400 million contract, or and then they also have their own special way of how they count the backlog. So I don't have huge, like, I would be surprised if the earnings would come out and it would be like, oh, the backlog is 1.5 billion, and it increased 500 million without any major announcements. So I'm not expecting that it will meaningfully increase. That's me.
Yeah, sorry, Scott, if you wanted to chime in there, but I think 1.5 is probably out of reach. But you have to keep in mind the VADR contract was signed in early January. Multiple IQPS launches were signed in the first quarter as well, and you also had a couple other of these Neutron contracts really solidified in the first. So the only thing in recent time, I think the reason why we forget about some of these things is we assume that they all kind of happened in the fourth quarter because they were announced prior to the fourth quarter earnings. But in reality, a lot of good announcements happened at the turn of the year and prior to the fourth quarter earnings. And so there's a lot of backlog that I think still needs to kind of be put into play, where I think that you could actually show up this quarter at about 1.3 billion. Granted, there is another piece, which I'm curious to see how that shows up as well, of the $40-odd billion contract that was just done with the UK Hyper Sonic, but that won't show up until the second quarter. But regardless, there's multi-billion-dollar contracts that have been signed, of which we know Rocket Lab's not going to get all of them. But we now know that the NSSL contract is at play. We know that the VADR contract is still at play. We've hit key milestones for Victus Hayes and the SDA Tranche 2 in terms of being able to kind of progress those. And so I don't want to lose sight. Plus the Kratos deal as well, which is also a multi-billion-dollar deal, and how much Rocket Lab could get in that. So I don't expect the backlog to be sitting here at close to 1.1 billion, between 1 and 1.1 billion. But keeping in mind, we are now burning at $125 million a quarter. So it is a little bit harder of a treadmill to kind of get past. But there's still a lot of contracts and a lot of news that I think could add to the backlog in this quarter.
Cool. So let's do a round table. Or Scott, did you want to add anything to this? Or
no, like
okay.
the only thing that really else to add is like the black box that is Mynaric in terms of like backlog and revenue addition throughout the year. But like that's
Good point.
Could close within, I think the like the settlement closes in Q2, but as far as the actual like next process, maybe that's another quarter, probably by the end of the year, I think is a safe assumption.
All right. So I was thinking, let's do a roundtable of like, what do you expect on earnings? Like, is Rocket Lab going to go up, go down after earnings? What is the thing that is the most important to you and you want to hear from the earnings? We do this. I think we start with Matt, and then we go to Scott, and then Dave.
Well, I do think I had a list of topics that I put in my video at about noontime. Updates on Neutron, obviously key milestones. I'm expecting an integrated test by the end of 2Q, early 3. So with hopes, obviously, by the end of the third quarter, fourth quarter, we get close to a launch. So would like to hear that. But in terms of the thing that I'm concentrating on most, might be that backlog piece. I do think, like you guys stated, we're going to be sitting in a lull in terms of revenue, but that doesn't mean that we're not making progress. I mean, from a trailing 12-month perspective, I think we're up. What was it? It was close to like 60% year over year. The trailing 12-month, when you got to the first quarter last year, was 282. We're looking at close to 450 plus. So I think you're right. Revenue will be slightly down quarter over quarter. So there's nothing going to be the surprise there. But to me, I think backlog is the thing that I'm looking forward to most, and kind of starting to see how that starts moving, because it's always been kind of concerning to me that we're sitting at a backlog that if we don't add to it, will be burned off in 2.5 years. So to me, I'm really looking forward to seeing the revenue growth for the rest of the year go to a run rate of over 500 million, about 125 to 150 million dollars a quarter. That would be nice, and then hopefully we'll see that hockey stick once Neutron gets some cadence. But in reality, I do think that we'll start to see some hockey sticking of the backlog, and my hope is that continues into the second and third quarter as well, as we get closer and closer to Neutron launch. More and more potential contracts will be signed up for.
Yeah, I think, Matt, you said it well. Just watching those, well, not even just the ones that were signed this quarter, or I guess I should say on-ramp this quarter, all those new projects between Neutron and Haste, and it seems like we're still bringing in a lot of just regular Electron launches as well, like thinking of, IQPS and whatnot. One thing that did stick out for me from Q4 is there was a mention that 16 spacecraft are, it says 16 spacecraft in space scheduled for launch or expected to have completed their missions by the end of Q3 of 2025. The reason that I guess I'm curious what that means in terms of like MDA, because those were supposed to be delivered like last year, and there's 17 of those. So I'm not even sure which 16 these could be, which craft they could be. So I'd like a little bit of color on that, ideally, just to kind of give us an outline of like just that kind of like revenue recognition throughout the year. Yeah, I think any sort of breadcrumbs as well for the constellation, or like what comes next for Flatlight would also be appreciated, but not really expecting too much from that quite yet. But yeah. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's not too much about the guidance, because they're only guiding one quarter out, and I think we all have a pretty decent idea, give or take 5-10%, like what the revenue numbers are going to be for the year. So it's really, I want to see the backlog grow, because I think that will give me more confidence for the future growth of next year and beyond. Specifically, I want to see the space systems backlog growth, because we know they only have so many Neutron launches to go around for the 135 kind of schedule. And they did kind of talk a while back, if you remember, Adam Spice saying something like, well, now we need to go double the backlog again, and that was a while ago now. We haven't seen a ton of growth. Yeah, I'd love to see another space systems contract that's worth $100 million plus. That'd be nice. These Electron launches, we keep getting new contracts, and very bullish about Haste, but I'd like to see a little more coming from the space systems. I don't know. And then Neutron, we just need to keep having confidence that it will launch this year. So got to watch that closely. Oh, and they never really miss on numbers, so I'm not really too worried about a miss or anything like that for the Q1 specifically.
Yeah, and they guided for the 117 million, I think, on the downside. I anticipate that was if they only got 4 launches off in the quarter, and obviously we got the 5. So I'm anticipating that we'll probably be on the upper end of that 117 to 123. But I agree, and I want to note, I think Scott said something that kind of triggered me when I was talking through my, not in a bad way, but just in general triggered my memory. The reason why I think also that revenue might be a little bit flat this year, and as you kind of alluded to, Scott, we are kind of over that MDA push. And so while you're seeing ramp up of other manufacturing of space systems, you're seeing that tranche of revenue kind of flat or go down. because obviously some of that's been realized. So as that large wave, if you kind of look at, actually, maybe I just share this really quick, as you kind of look at that large wave of revenue come through over the past, I just shared it. So if you could share that. As we see that large tranche of space systems revenue in the blue kind of coming through, we potentially going to start to actually see a slight decline. And eventually I anticipate the growth of reaction wheels and solar panels and all these other things that have also been growing helps offsets this sort of like plateau that we're potentially seeing here in space systems. And my also could be wrong here at my estimate for launch. I'm assuming 5 launches at about $8 million a pop. So I would say revenues for launch is going to be probably anywhere between 35 and 40 million. So that would leave about 80 million for space systems. So anyway, I just anticipate that with that, until you start shipping out some of these SDA contracts, SDA satellites, there's potentially going to be not a huge wave of realized revenue from the satellite perspective, but more of the space component business. And that's part of the reason why a couple of quarters ago, and sorry if I'm just going on a monologue and tangent, but a couple of quarters ago, I asked Peter and Adam if they'd actually be willing to separate out some of the details around each business, because if you think about it, and the answer was no, they don't plan on it at the moment. But the thought process is like for space systems, you could talk about, is it space components or actual space like buses and satellites that they're actually selling? And that would actually allow you to kind of understand what the difference is here. Because if this blue were separated, I'm sure you'd see a large wedge associated with deliveries of the MDA Global Star contract in 2024. And that would slowly start to kind of come off or even go to zero as the rest of the space components business was growing alongside in 2024. And then same thing with launch. We don't have this problem right now, but because 60 of the 63 launches from the Electron vehicle have been for Electron, and 3 of which have been for HASTE. But when we get 5 years down the road, being able to track launch when it comes to 3 different potential opportunities is going to be kind of peculiar. It's like, well, how much of it came from Electron, how much from HASTE, and how much from Neutron? So at the moment, it's not obviously a problem that we have to deal with, but I anticipate as we get closer to a couple $1 billion revenue business in the 2030 plus timeframe, it would be nice to see that splitting.
Matt, as you're explaining that, I actually do have some numbers on MDA, and I'll preface saying that we don't know if MDA is like exclusively the Global Star buses, or if maybe behind the scenes they do like whatever other components with them as well. But MDA is one of those 10% plus customers that you can see in the 10Q or the 10K. And to simplify the math, as of Q4 end, there's only $6.3 to $10.8 million left in that contract to be recognized. And as I'm looking at kind of pairing it with that statement I made earlier about the 16 craft by Q3, it I guess concerns me, because I'm like, is Rocket Lab still going to be working on these all year? Because they've recognized all that revenue. So is this just like cost of goods sold at this point, or I don't know. And I'm also curious on that note, like the Escapade satellites, because those are still in Rocket Lab's or back in Rocket Lab's possession again. Like, are those still considered to be backlog, or, you know, 'cause I'm sure it's minimal to store those at Rocket Lab's facility, but it's like, probably best
that working capital thing that always bothers the crap out of me. I'm pretty good when it comes to reading the big statements, but the working capital piece is something that always bothers me, because it's like, when you look at things on an annual basis, much easier to keep track of. But when you look at things on a quarterly basis, it's like, okay, well, this was delivered, March 31st, but actuality, we took control of it on April 2nd. How that working capital piece is. Yeah, but that's really cool that you kind of noted that the MDA contract. So I do anticipate that space systems will kind of level off until we get the next tranche of potential contracts. But you're right. I mean, who knows what are we doing with those, and is it all cost or what have you? But speaking specifically on that, actually, one of the predictions I am making, which might be a little bit bold, and this is very peculiar, right? So I'm not saying profitability, I'm not saying EBITDA positive, but I am saying ops cash positive from a ops cash flow, right? Like the actual ops cash, meaning the gross profit minus the cost of goods sold, actually being positive. So we lost $2 million on the ops cash flow last quarter. So my anticipation with the 5 launches that we had, coupled with a decent run rate in space systems, that we will be ops cash positive on the underlying businesses. Keep in mind, from an EBITDA perspective, you still have to incorporate a lot of other things that would actually make you still EBITDA negative. But the hope is that from an underlying business perspective, we're getting closer and closer to that break-even point. And then obviously from a free cash perspective, you have all the CapEx associated with Neutron. So that's obviously not going to happen this quarter as well. But being in that potential lens of showing the the spotlight of being on the runway to being profitable, I think starts this quarter with being ops cash positive.
That would be very big news. That would be very big news. And a huge milestone. Okay, I think we have come to the end. I don't know if you guys want to say anything more. It's we're going over the usual time that we do.
I guess I'll just throw in one last thought.
Yeah.
Talking so much about backlog, whatever they have cooking for their own constellation obviously doesn't show up in backlog. So, you never know how much growth that could drive, and you won't see it coming.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
And one thing for me, which would be very exciting, is if they would announce that they're launching flutter-lights on the first Neutron, because that's technically like a free way of testing their satellites,
It'll be interesting to see if like, 'cause I'm sure they have the finger on the pulse, but if they kind of know that we kind of know the rough launch window, I wonder if they're going to be like, okay, they kind of, pushed our hand. So here it is, September it is, or if it is just going to be vague and second half of the year still, or it's going to be exciting times as they kind of dial that in, get a little bit more accurate with the time frame.
Yeah. Awesome, guys. And who is live streaming the earnings?
I'll probably do it.
What time is it? 8th at 4 Thursday.
I will also try to do it.
Most likely.
So, yeah. So I guess, guys, you just look out on Twitter and then you will find who is live streaming where.
Mm-hmm. 5 p.m. Eastern next Thursday, 4 p.m. Central for you people on the third coast here of the United States.
Okay, cool. So thank you everyone for being here. May the skies stay blue and your Rocket Lab stay green. And see you on the earnings call. Yeah, ciao everyone.
Thanks for having us all.
Yeah, thanks for coming.